All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon. In this video, we're going to talk about what the face of boxing has to say about Terence Crawford and Errol Spence, and that is Canelo Alvarez makes his pick for who wins that fight. Let's talk about that and the fact that it is the biggest fight in boxing and bigger than the fight he has with Gennady Golovkin in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon. In this video, we're going to talk about two things. First is Canelo Alvarez and what he had to say about the Errol Spence Jr. Terence Crawford fight and who he picked. And number two, the very, very interesting situation that Canelo Alvarez winds up in, being asked about a fight that is bigger than his fight coming up. And it most certainly is, no matter what Eddie Hearn had to say about that fight. Now, before I get into that, let me welcome you back to the channel. If you are a longtime subscriber and supporter of the channel, thank you so much for your support. Thank you for continuing to come by and watch the channel. If you are new to the channel, accept my invitation to hit the subscribe button and the bell icon hit the bell icon so you can be notified of when we release more videos. All right, so talking about the biggest fights that can be made in boxing, the biggest fighter, three of the biggest names in boxing. And I think right about now, the order of who the biggest fighters are is going through a transition. Now, Canelo Alvarez has a fight coming up with Gennady Golovkin for the undisputed title at 168 pounds. They had previously fought for unify titles at 160 pounds back in, I think it was in 2017, 2018 timeframe. They fought a couple times. The first fight was a draw. I thought Canelo Alvarez won the first fight. A lot of people thought that Gennady Golovkin won the first fight. The second fight, he fights Gennady Golovkin. He wins the fight. A lot of people still think he loses to Gennady Golovkin, but he moves on and fights a bunch of other people, right? But now he's going back to where he started, or back to where he was and back in 2017 and fighting Gennady Golovkin. So in the lead up to this fight, he has a press conference. And in the press conference, he is asked, what does he think about Errol Spence Jr. and Terence Crawford? His take on the fight between Errol and Terence is that he thinks Errol's a very good fighter, but he thinks Terence Crawford is a better fighter. And so Terence Crawford will win the fight. Not a very, not a super breakdown of the fight, not a, super intellectual, evaluation of it, but he does join several other Hall of Fame level fighters that have picked for Terence Crawford recently. Probably the most famous of them would be Roy Jones Jr. and Antonio Tarver, who on their podcast gave specific reasons why they would favor Errol Spence, Terence Crawford in that fight over Errol Spence Jr. Make sure I say that right. Favored Terence Crawford in his fight over Errol Spence Jr. And now Canelo Alvarez is doing the same. So it seems as if, most of the big name fighters, Hall of Fame level fighters, and that is what Canelo Alvarez is. If y'all don't think Canelo, and I'm going to tell you because somebody's going to be in the comment section, tell me that Canelo Alvarez is not a Hall of Fame fighter. Whether you think Canelo Alvarez is going to get in the Hall of Fame or not, or I think Canelo Alvarez is going to get in the Hall of Fame or not, is absolutely positively irrelevant because the voters are going to put that man in that Hall of Fame. The guy's won titles at 154, 160, 168, and 175. One of the biggest draws in boxing, if not, at the current moment, people would say that he is the biggest draw in boxing, even though his numbers in his last fight don't pan out for that to be the case. But he definitely deserves credit as being that level of fighter because that's where he's going to wind up. He's going to be right there next to Andre Ward, James Toney, Antonio Tarver, and Roy Jones Jr., Layla Ali, everybody else that got in there. Give it a couple years after he retires, he's going to be right in there with probably the same class of people going in there in the same class as Terence Crawford. Now, what does this mean, though, for me? Well, one of the points that I wanted to bring up was this is very, very funny because whoever it is that wins that fight between Errol Spence Jr. and Terence Crawford, let me put it this way, if it's Errol Spence Jr., Errol Spence Jr. will more than likely pass up Canelo Alvarez as being the biggest money guy in boxing, because that fight, not that just that fight, but the fights that would await him afterwards are going to be big. And actually, in his last fight, Errol Spence Jr. outsold Terence Crawford in his last fight. Now, he didn't have as big a gate, right? Because Canelo Alvarez, I think, had a $9 million gate and did, according to Leonard Ellerby of Mayweather Promotions, did 120,000 pay-per-views, which for Canelo Alvarez is just way, way, way down in satellite and cable buys. Anybody else was going to watch the fight is going to be subscribed to DAZN to buy that pay-per-view. Now, I just so happen to be one of the people that is subscribed to DAZN and bought the fight through DAZN. But if you're not subscribed to DAZN, not a lot of people bought that. Now, that again is not to say that if Canelo goes back and fights, like say he fights Jermall Charlo or he fights somebody like David Benavidez and he gets off that app, that those numbers won't go up if people are really interested in the fight. It just so happens that Canelo Alvarez is taking fights that not a lot of people are really interested in, man. Talking about chasing his legacy and doing that. Like, and I say this in my live stream often, like, look, I'm not interested in your legacy. What I'm interested in is seeing who you want to fight next and giving me an entertaining fight. When you're actually out there and getting, inducted into the Hall of Fame, like the conversation we were having just a couple minutes ago, hey man, yeah, okay, then it's time to talk about your legacy and what a great fighter you were and get all your flowers handed to you when you go into Canastoitia, the International Boxing Hall of Fame. When you get put in there, that's the time to talk about legacy. When you're still an active fighter, it's time to fight the people that other people actually want to see you fight. And that is something that Canelo Alvarez has not been doing lately. And that's why people are not running around asking Errol Spence Jr. who he thinks is going to win the Canelo Alvarez versus Gennady Golovkin fight, right? That's not a conversation that is going to be had for two reasons. Number one, not a lot of people are in doubt about it. Even though I have to tell you, I think that Gennady Golovkin probably has a better chance than some people think, because I think both him and Canelo are a little bit long in the tooth, or have taken a lot of punishment. Now, obviously, Gennady Golovkin is just older in age, but I think Canelo Alvarez has a lot of wear and tear. But not a lot of people are just caring about the fight or asking people about that fight because it's something we've already seen before. Not a lot of people are in doubt about it, and it's something that nobody's asking for. Nobody asked for that fight except for DAZN. DAZN and Gennady Golovkin are the only people that cared about that fight or making that fight. And that fight, when it happens, it may be a little bit more interesting than the Dimitri Bivol fight, but it's certainly nothing on the level of Canelo, of Errol Spence and Terence Crawford if they make that fight. But anyway, that's my take on the matter. You let me know what you think in the comment section. And with that, I'm out. Deuces.